Hi, thanks for joining me today. Today we're going to be talking about sequencing. And in my sequencing methodology, I use a system of blocks. Essentially, I teach you how to identify poses that are in neutral flexion or neutral extension, apart from poses that are in external rotation flexion and external rotation extension. Once you understand these basic principles, then you can begin to group poses together with like poses. For example, if I was going to sequence a sequence that is going to lead me towards, let's say, standing splits, I might be working a lot with poses that have neutral flexion and neutral extension, because these postures will help me to get students into standing splits. If I was going to sequence Bakasana, crow pose, I might use postures that have external rotation and flexion, because that will help to inform crow pose. We can begin to work with this in very simple ways, even starting with our warm-up. When we begin to look at postures based on their pelvic or shoulder alignment, then we can identify what other poses have similar alignments. For example, low lunge, crescent lunge, half splits, warrior one, standing splits, warrior three. All of these postures are flexion in neutral. That means that the leg bone or the femur bone is in a neutral orientation in the pelvis, and the pelvis is in flexion. On the other hand, warrior two, extended side angle, triangle, half moon, goddess posture, skandasana, crow pose, all of these postures leverage external rotation and flexion. Once we can identify these groupings, we can put poses together into small blocks. I typically tell people that blocks should consist of 3 to 5 postures. And we can move from neutral to external rotation, but we don't want to move from external rotation to neutral. Let's take a look at what these blocks might look like and how you can use them to sequence a larger sequence. Here I'm starting in a low lunge. Low lunge is a neutral pelvic orientation, and we know that because my pelvis is facing the top of the mat. So this tells me that my pelvis is in neutral. Now you can see that the front leg is in flexion and the back leg is in extension. I know that because the hip flexor is extended here and the hip flexor is contracted in the front leg. In order to get my hip flexor in extension, I have to have flexion in the glute, bringing this leg back away from the body. So here we have flexion in neutral. And we can add to this posture maybe half splits, which is also another example of flexion in a neutral orientation. I can add to this posture a standing forward fold. And now I'm still in a neutral orientation in flexion. Maybe a halfway lift, then a forward fold, all the way to Tadasana and Samastitihi. So here we've used Anjaneyasana, half splits, forward fold, half lift, and Tadasana. So that's about 5 postures that we've created a block, or a mini sequence, if you will. Now, from there, I might step back and do a different block, right? So, I'm in Tadasana. Inhale, reach up. Exhale, fold forward. Halfway lift, inhale. And exhale, I'm going to step back with my right foot and take it to the right, coming in for goddess pose. So from goddess pose, I can stay here, or if I'd like to, I can come into skandasana. From here, I place my hands down, I can come back to the top of the mat and come in to Warrior Two. Warrior Two leads itself into extended side angle, and extended side angle leads itself into reversed warrior, and then we windmill the hands down and we reset the pelvis in neutral. Notice here my pelvis has been reset into neutral. My sacrum is nice and flat. My pelvis is facing the top of the mat. From here, I can use many different transitions to get back to downward facing dog. We don't have to stay in one orientation in order to create a block. Let me show you a few ways that we can move in and out of neutral and external rotation to create more complicated blocks. From downward dog, I'm going to bring the right leg forward and come in for Warrior One. Neutral flexion in Warrior One. Then I'm going to launch out into Warrior Three. I might touch down for standing splits. So this in and of itself is a small block of 3 poses. I float my toes back and open up into Warrior Two. Now notice that when I floated my toes back, I had all of my limbs on the ground, 2 hands, 2 feet before I opened up into Warrior Two, and this helps us to distribute the weight. Now I'm going to reverse my warrior, come in for extended side angle. Now I've had 3 postures in this block. From here, I might look down, grab my block, and come in for half moon. From half moon, I can gently float back, reverse warrior, and then windmill the hands back down, resetting the pelvis. Now I can move into another block or a transition. Some transitions are more difficult than others. Let's take a look at an example of a transition that is a little bit challenging to do, and therefore I don't recommend doing it in your sequences. I come in for Warrior Two. Here we're in Warrior Two. I flip my palm and I reverse. Now let's say I want to come back in for Warrior One. This transition, although it is safe, it is not as smooth as going from Warrior One to Warrior Two. Typically, when we are working with transitions or moving in and out from neutral to external rotation, we're going to start in neutral and open into external rotation. If we need to get back to neutral, we do that with all 4 limbs on the ground. Let me show you how. Coming in for Warrior One. This would be an ideal way to move in and out of neutral and external rotation. Warrior Two. Extended side angle. Coming back up for reversed warrior. Windmill the hands down, lift the back heel, and pause. Now that my pelvis is nice and neutral, I can take standing splits. There's one thing that I ask students not to do when they're sequencing, and it's really only one thing, and that is I ask students not to move from external rotation to neutral or from neutral to external rotation on a weight-bearing balancing leg, okay? So let's talk about what that means. If I'm in Warrior Two, I'm in external rotation, and my weight is evenly distributed between my 2 legs. Now, I'm coming in to half moon, let's say. Come into half moon. Now, this in and of itself is fine, but sometimes we hear teachers saying to go from half moon to standing splits. We don't want to do this. It's dangerous and not healthy for the inside of the hip joint, the acetabulum. So how do we do it? How do we incorporate half moon and standing splits in the same sequence? We float back to Warrior Two. We windmill the hands down. And then we move into standing splits. What we don't want to do is this. Warrior two, extended side angle, half moon, standing splits. The reason we don't want to do this is because the femoral head sits in the acetabulum like this. And when we externally rotate the femoral head in the acetabulum, we move it from a neutral position like this to external rotation. That's totally fine to do when we have our limbs to distribute the weight. But if we don't have the limbs to distribute the weight, then I'm going to move from external rotation to neutral with 160 pounds of my body weight pressing onto that femur as it's moving from external to neutral. It can actually cause a lot of unnecessary compression inside the acetabulum. And the soft tissues inside the acetabulum, called the labrum, can become damaged. There are many different ways that we can sequence asana. We can sequence asana with a waterfall sequence, where we progressively add more intense postures as we move through towards a peak posture. We can sequence a flow to peak, where we're moving towards a peak posture, progressively opening the body to prepare for that peak posture. We can sequence classes in a mandala configuration, where we move around the mat completely. And we can sequence asana in a half mandala configuration. We can use these little blocks, either 3 poses or 5 poses, and then we can add other blocks to those blocks to create bigger sequences. So let me give you an example of a more complicated sequence, and I'm going to break down these blocks for you so that hopefully you can see what we're doing. So from Tadasana, we're going to start in neutral flexion. Inhale, reach up. Exhale, fold forward. Halfway lift. Stepping back, we come into crescent lunge. Crescent lunge. Here to an open twist. Open twist, maybe drop the hand, reach the arm back. Inhale back through center. Exhale, release the hands, pyramid pose. So this is our neutral flexion block, okay? So I'm here in my pyramid pose. Now I'm going to add my next block. My next block is going to take us from neutral to external rotation. I'm going to ground the foot, come in for warrior two, flip the palm, come in for extended side angle. Stay in the posture for a breath or two. Inhale, come up and reverse. Straighten the leg. Trikonasana. Here I am. I'm going to stay for a breath or two. I can either stay in Trikonasana or I can take half moon. Moving into half moon. When I'm ready, I come back. Reverse your warrior. Now I want to move around the mat. I'm going to use a transition. Windmill the hands to the inside of the foot. Turn the toes to the back of the mat. Straighten the leg for Skandasana. Now I release the hands. Come back for a wide-angled forward fold. The toes can be out, or the toes can be parallel, or the toes can be slightly in. Fold forward. And from here, I might do a twist, hand under the face, left arm raises, hand under the face, left arm raises. So here we've had another block, okay? I'm going to walk my hands back to the top of the mat. I'm going to come lower to the ground now. Anjaneyasana to half splits. So here is another small block. And then if I wanted to take it a step further, I might bring the right leg to the outside of the left, sit back into Gomukhasana, and fold forward. From here, I might come forward, unwind, extend the back foot, open it up for a supported side plank. Now, hands down, tuck the toes, send the left leg up and back, and we're back through crescent lunge. So let's see it one more time. Crescent lunge, coming into pyramid pose. From pyramid pose, drop the back foot, coming in for warrior two. Warrior two, reverse warrior, straighten the leg, trikonasana. Trikonasana to half moon to reverse warrior. Windmill the hands down inside the foot, back toes turn to the back of the mat, skandasana. Release the hands, coming in for that wide angled forward fold. And again, feet can be parallel, or feet can be slightly turned in, or feet can be turned out slightly. It really depends on what you're getting into at the hamstrings. Hand under the face, left arm raises. Hand under the face, right arm raises. Release the right hand, walk it to the top of the mat. Lower the right knee. Anjaneyasana. Now we're on our fourth block here. Releasing the hands, half splits. From half splits, Gomukhasana. Now we're on to this fifth block, yeah? Reach up and fold forward. Take a breath or two, pull your heart forward, unwind, extend the back leg, supported side plank. And we're perfectly positioned for transition. Right leg up and back, pull it through. Now we get to do something else on the other side. When we look at the poses and put them into families or groups, then we can easily select postures that complement one another. We can create small blocks of 3 to 5 postures, sometimes even 2 postures, and link them together to create a longer sequence. And then we put Surya Namaskara A in between each side to create flow. I hope that you found this video helpful. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch it. Be well, yogis. Namaste.